Welcome to episode number 53 of Roll or Die. Today we have the esteemed Gerald Batty. If you've been living under a rock, or, well, I'm not really sure how you would miss him, how he would get under a rock, because this guy's a big unit. I think we've got a bit of a reputation, Anton, of having some of the OGs onto our podcast, and this guy is most definitely an OG. What year did you get your black belt, Gerald?
2008.
Wow. Yes.
Coming up to 30
before
years.
some of these kids were even born, perhaps. So yeah, very esteemed MMA career of sorts, and CrossFit referee. Is that right, or what?
Correct. Yeah, CrossFit judge, which I guess is the equivalent of a referee in sort of MMA or jiu-jitsu terms. You get to say what counts and what doesn't, which is the same as jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. So welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks, Anton. Pleasure to be here. I've been watching and listening to your podcast for a while, and yeah, hold you both in very high respect, both on and off the mat. So yeah, it's a real privilege to be invited. Thank you.
That's really kind of you, brother. Really kind of you. So you've become a father in recent, like, how old's your bubba now?
Correct. That's my biggest achievement, actually. So he's 2. He's just gone 2, but he is 93 centimeters and 17.5 kilos. Like, surprise, surprise. So he's going to be a unit. I think he's going to leave me for dead, or I hope he does, actually. So I'm super excited to spend time with him and just to see him and grow and change. He's a cool little human.
Yeah. And what's the impact that's had on you as a human being? I guess. You're a referee in MMA. I saw you, refereeing just the other day. That's what inspired you coming on the podcast, actually. Saw you up there. I thought,
thanks,
Gerald, holy shit, we gotta get him on.
Oh, yeah, that guy. Yep.
That guy. Yep. Yeah. And yeah, just how's it impacted you now that you're, the way that you engage with humans, especially,
Sure. It's interesting, those two things are linked together. So actually, for a couple of reasons, gave up refereeing for a while, gave up MMA officiating for a while. And part of that was around Jack being born and just not having any time and wanting to very much dedicate some time to him and kind of, and also to that time, just be around. I took about 3 months off work, and when he was sort of just before he was born and just after he was born. And so, yeah, things did change. It was something I took pretty seriously and something I really look forward to. So, yeah, it's work changed, I changed, life changed. It's I think for anyone who has kids, it's one of those things people talk about it. They're like, oh yeah, this is gonna, you won't know until it happens, blah blah blah, and you're like, oh yeah, okay, and then it does, and you're like, okay, now I get it. Now I get the sleepless nights. Now I get the fact that it's not all about you anymore. Now I get that there's going to be, just regardless of jiu-jitsu black belts or any other life achievements, you're just confronted with this human that you're like, I don't know what you want. I don't know what you need. I don't know how to make you stop crying. I don't know what to do.
Wow.
I'm at a complete loss.
Yeah.
So, and then the converse is, and that, I don't mean to make that sound negative. It's not at all, as you both know. But it's then on the other side of that, there's just this amazing inspiration when they start doing the things that you do, and you're like, oh, where did you learn that? You think, oh, I know, that's what I do, So, and you're like, oh, okay, now I have to do things right, because you're going to do them however I do them, and if I do them wrong, you're going to do them wrong for a long time, and that's going to be hard to train out. So it's, yeah, as a as a coach, it's kind of interesting, because you're coaching this little guy, and whether you choose to or not, it's not like he turns up to training a couple of nights a week and you coach him for those 2 hours. It's like 100% of the time. So it's amazing. Anyone who's sitting on the fence of kind of parenthood, do it. That's the ether. That's what we're here for. I think it's amazing.
Yeah. Thank you, brother.
Yeah, very rewarding, isn't it? Yeah, nothing really compares.
I totally agree. Yeah, there's no other life achievement I've had that even comes close to being a dad.
Yep. Yeah. Fantastic. Did you find it difficult at all being, I hope you don't mind me saying, a little bit older when you
No, great question. So I'll be 49 this year. I was 46 when Jack was born. Yeah, it was kind of like I did question it, and I do kind of wonder about, time to come and think, yeah, okay, when he's 21, I'll be kind of, let's do the math, 67. So, you know, those kind of things do weigh on your mind. I think more than anything, it's kind of motivation to maintain your health, maintain your, you know, that vitality that you need to continue to be a role model and continue to be present and kind of be able to enjoy and participate in what he's going to do. So yeah, I'm kind of glad I've got my health. I'm glad I haven't had any kind of big cardiac events or any kind of big health deals to deal with, because that would be more significant in terms of consideration than just age.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I mean, you are a very healthy specimen. Tell us about your sort of journey into martial arts, how you came about, what.
Sure. Thanks. I kind of, if I appear healthy, my Facebook's doing a good job. I put on 25 kilos over COVID, and I've just taken off about nearly 20. So thank you. And they weren't healthy kilos at all. So, and yeah, my lifestyle was pretty bad. So yeah, look, I think your question was around what got me into martial arts. So yeah, way back when, I actually started doing Kung Fu, was the first martial art I ever did. And I was never a tough guy at school, or I never had like a background in fighting or a kind of a pedigree kind of growing up. But I started working as a bouncer when I was about 20, 21, going through TAFE and uni and stuff. And I figured out pretty quickly that just I played a bit of rugby and stuff, that wasn't really going to get me through all the things I needed to get through working as a doorman. So I figured I needed to go learn how to fight. So, or at least look after myself as compared to fight, make sure I didn't get hurt. So I started doing some Kung Fu. That was pretty weird, I'll be honest. It was Wing Chun, and it was a sort of strange scenario and master, but I didn't really understand. I couldn't compare it to anything. And interestingly, probably the second thing I came across was Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I saw a poster in a kebab shop in like Vic Park in Perth, which basically advertised like full contact training, submission grappling, which I had no idea what that meant. But all I could see was the full contact training. And at the time, the Kung Fu I was doing, I was being told that, oh, we can't practice this, we can't spar because it's too dangerous and people are going to die and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, you know, I kind of feel like that's what I need to do. I'm a bit of a experiential learner. So I'm like, okay, looking and hearing isn't working. So I turned up to my first jiu-jitsu lesson, got smashed by some little guys who I kind of figured I was, you know, could probably take, you know, if they'd kind of walked into the bar that I worked at. And I was like, wow, okay, that set me right back, set me thinking. And I came back from maybe a second or third lesson and I was completely hooked. I was like, I need to learn how to do that and be like a heavyweight, and that means I'm going to be fine working as a bouncer. So that was my strategy, that was my motivation, and for a long time that was what carried me through, was that continual kind of, I continued working as a bouncer. In fact, I only gave that away maybe 4 or 5 years ago. So I continued to be motivated by, you know, not getting my ass kicked at work.
That's good. So
what year was that? When did you start up?
1996. So yeah, way back with a guy called Jason Gotch in what was one of the very first Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu schools in Perth, and possibly, you know, one of the first ones in Australia.
Wow.
I'm interested to know, like with Jiu-Jitsu, using it in a bouncing context, how often have you been able to neutralize people without hurting them? And you know, where they're wanting to throw punches and those sorts of things.
Sure.
I know you've got some striking background as well, but
a little, but nothing compared to jiu-jitsu. So, good question. All the time. Like I've probably used it hundreds and hundreds of times at work. And as you described, like in order to control a situation or to prevent kind of further damage to me or anybody else, it's a very, very valid and worked for me all the time. And ultimately, if you're trying to relocate someone, you're going to have to grab them usually, unless they're running from you, in which case it's really simple. So if you have to engage with them and grab them, then that's jiu-jitsu. So as you know, so and if they go to sleep on the way, then that makes it a lot simpler. So so yeah, all the time. I wouldn't. I got really lucky. I think if I'd fallen into many other styles, which would have been equally effective in MMA and would have had their own pedigree of, you know, I've done a bit of boxing, bit of kickboxing, wrestling, etc. Those would have all been, you know, highly applicable self-defense arts, but not as appropriate in a sort of a crowd control scenario.
Yeah, so, you would have essentially been a lot more thuggy as a security worker than you are. You know, you're probably a nice guy of security, really.
Correct. Yeah. Look, it's a good point. I didn't actually consider we might talk about that as when I thought about how this was going to go today. But yeah, it's a really good point. And yeah, you do get kind of known as like the soft touch because, you know, people aren't being ambulanced or bleeding, or, you know, you're not,
Yeah.
you know, I've been to plenty of altercations where there's guys kind of washing their hands in the sink and there's teeth falling out of their, you know, knuckles and stuff, and lots of crazy stories. But I was never one of those guys. So I was lucky enough to have started jiu-jitsu and that was my go-to. You know, if I was ever in trouble, I'd kind of grab hold of people, and yeah, that served me very well.
Amazing.
Changing tacks a bit here, changing track. We've had lots of people on and talk to them about their journey and things like that. For myself, as a relatively new black belt, and you're quite an experienced black belt, you're 13 years. Can you tell me, can you give me any kind of advice about the black belt journey itself? Like, what can I expect? Like, yeah.
That's an interesting question. Kim, did you feel like you wanted to give it straight back? Were you
Yeah,
like,
I felt like that with every belt.
Yeah, yeah.
You never feel worthy.
True, it's true. There's some belts I really wanted. I really wanted to be a blue belt. I set about goal setting and planning and doing privates and seeking that. It was something I really wanted. And then when I got it, I was like, oh, you know, like this is heavier than I thought it was going to be. And now I felt like I have to live up to it. And purple came around fairly quickly, actually. And I thought I was probably a little underdone. I was like, oh, that was a surprise. But I was winning some comps at blue belt and stuff. And I thought, okay, you know, okay, fair enough. I'll run with that. And so purple belt, I was purple belt for like 6 years. So by the time I got through purple belt, I was like, or got to brown again, I was sort of like, okay, I feel like I'm ready, and maybe even a little overdue, as if it really mattered. You know, that was when I went off and did some MMA and some other things. So I wasn't really kind of concentrating on my jiu-jitsu progression. And then went from brown to black really fast. I was like, no. You know, like that's not ready. You know, wouldn't have minded a couple more years at brown belt to kind of feel like I took ownership of that. And suddenly I've got a black belt and I'm like, oh, okay, what do I do with it? You know, and sort of, so yeah, for me, the journey was like, I felt like I didn't quite deserve it, or I wasn't quite sure, and I had a lot of questions. So I started doing some more competitions, which I hadn't done for a little while, and that was probably an effort to prove to myself that I belonged in those divisions. And that started. I had some great matches around that time with guys like Dan Cherubin and Big Mick at Peter Beans, and they were kind of halcyon days. They were great days, but it took me about 2 or 3 years to grow into a black belt. And I started doing some coaching as well, like more coaching, I must admit, and making a point of doing that, or that was something I kind of sought rather than kind of let come to me for a while. But it really took a couple of years to settle in, maybe 2 or 3 years before I really felt like, okay, I'm here, I'm part of this community. I'm sort of, and there are still times when that kind of comes and goes. So my advice to you is have faith in your coach. That's you know, it's a huge kind of decision for them to kind of grade anybody, and really be proud of your achievements. Like if he or she thinks that you're a black belt, then, you know, chances are they're right. And you know, it's just a journey for you to kind of take ownership and understanding and accept that, and be on your own terms, and kind of get on with the opportunity that it provides. But there's a cheesy cliche about the black belt being like just the start, and that's kind of a bit of how I've felt. I've felt like my journey's kind of split in half now, where it's been about half before black belt and about half of it afterwards. And the second half's been like a really kind of interesting journey where I stopped concentrating on kind of evolution and started kind of going a little bit wider with my focus, and kind of doing other things with it. So yeah, it's again, if I can kind of give anyone advice who's listening to this, like, go get your black belt. Like, you know, kind of stay on that journey. Don't be the one that kind of has a purple belt or a brown belt in a cupboard and thinks, oh, I could have, should have, didn't. No, go get it. So stick with it. That's a huge life achievement.
I love it.
I mean, I think with the other belts, for me anyway, I felt like, oh, I don't really deserve this, and you can grow into it. And I guess for me, there was that expectation that there's still more to learn. But it's weird because maybe other people think the black belt knows everything. And I'm like, I might know a bit of some things, but I think for me, black belt's where I realize how little I know.
Yes.
I feel like I'm just, like you said, just beginning again. So
yeah, it's a new beginning. Yep,
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely.
And yeah, black belts don't know everything. Geez, it's funny.
No, not at all.
And you know what's going to happen? People will think like, about, they know how to talk to women, or they know about cars, or they can probably program like TV remotes and stuff like that. And you think, no, we're hopelessly incompetent. That's how we got to be a black belt. We gave up learning all those other things just to be good at jiu-jitsu.
Training.
Yeah.
I like how you want TV remotes into it. That's fucking
yeah.
So you were part of the Spartan MMA series, is that right? Was that MMA or was that?
It was.
Yeah.
No, it was MMA.
Yeah, and that's a long time ago. We're talking back 2003 when my kids were born, around that era.
Correct.
And so, did you have jiu-jitsu in your arsenal at that point? Was that?
I did. Yeah, I was a purple belt at that point. I had my first MMA match as a purple belt, and most of my jiu-jitsu, most of my MMA was at that time. I think my last match I was a brown belt.
And you were fighting some monster-sized guys by the look of it. You're a big guy as well. But what's the mindset like? Are you like, I'm a big guy, so therefore they're about the same size? Or did you look across and go, my God, you're a big man, and then just scared? What were you like? What was it like?
Sometimes the height and weight is scary, and other times you can kind of rationalize it. Look, the first time I fought, I gave up a lot of weight. I gave up about 20 kilos to my opponent. He'd fought before, but I guess because of my jiu-jitsu pedigree, the matchmaker was like, okay, this is going to be a reasonable match. And I remember sizing him up at the weigh-in, as you do, and thinking, and I was intimidated by his size because he was bigger than me. I was a little taller. But I thought, if he walked into a bar, could I throw him out? And I kind of decided that I could, and that was kind of my way of trying to make it real for me. Like, this is that's kind of normalize it. That makes it kind of mean something. And I felt more confident after I'd sort of had that little conversation with myself. But then there's other times where even as your music's playing and you're walking into the ring, you're still thinking, oh my God, this guy is such a beast. And is it too late to pull out? Is it too late to kind of, will people understand? And as you know, I posted some photos, some fights recently on Facebook, and that was kind of, again, there's been a bit of interest in that, which has been cool. And one of my opponents, Soa Palele, again, he was nearly 30 kilos heavier than me, and he was by far the scariest guy I ever kind of stared down at a weigh-in or walked into the ring against. And I think I mentioned in that post about that fight, like after that normalized a lot of things. That normalizes the rest of my opponents. Dare I say it, kind of union delegates kind of, turning up to my construction sites. It normalizes a lot of things where I might be intimidated by intimidating men. And then I look back on those times and think, no, I got through that and I'm still here. So I'm okay. I'll be okay.
Amazing.
Yeah. And 2003, that would have been very, very early days of MMA in Australia. Like, how was it different, like, for our listeners who are only so different to the MMA of now?
So different, but so similar. And so the differences were, there were only a couple of states in Australia that it was legal. So, and Victoria wasn't one of them. Yeah. So at the time, the Combat Sports Board didn't really have a martial arts or mixed martial arts rule set. So you were fighting under kind of boxing boards and kickboxing boards and stuff like that. You'll notice all the Spartan tapes that I put up, they were all in a ring. So there was no cage fighting at that point. That sort of came a little bit later. So fighting in the ring compared to the cage, I much prefer the cage, particularly being a grappler. And for a variety of different reasons, I found the ring, can be isn't always your friend. So that was a key difference. Some of the rules have changed. Back when I was fighting, there were no elbows, for example, which again, I was kind of glad about at the time and used to intimidate me a little bit. Now I kind of look at them and think, yeah, okay, you can just manage them as another weapon, as a risk and opportunity.
Yeah.
So the rules have evolved to a degree, but I think, and the fighters have evolved massively. Like I look at those old tapes and all I see is like these two slow kind of moving guys, dancing around a ring. It doesn't look anything like the UFC or the Australian shows. Like the guys on Hex and the guys on AFC, they are super athletes. They really have to be super athletes to get to those levels. And, and certainly if they're going to go beyond, the guys in the UFC are just, absolute, as they should be, professional fighters and professional athletes. So they're kind of some of the key differences. But I think the mental side of it is still very much the same. Like that long journey when your music starts playing and you realize, okay, here we go. This is, it's time. That kind of long walk to the cage or the ring or whatever the arena is. I don't think that changes. I don't think time kind of changes that. I think the camaraderie that's built up between, coaches and trainers and fighters and the fight camps that people go through to get to MMA, to fights, I think that's universal. That doesn't change over time. That's sort of like that human bond that goes with that. That's very special and a very valuable part of the experience. So yeah, and I think the best change is that it's regular. There's up until COVID, there were shows every other month in every state in Australia. So you didn't have to get on a plane. You didn't have to leave your kind of comfort zone behind. You could fight just about in your own postcode, and against kind of guys that were relatively evenly matched, and you kind of knew a little bit about. So, and so all those kind of people look back on those old journeys and like, oh, that's so cool, and that was so special, and it kind of was at the time for those reasons. It was unusual and rare and special to do that. It's more common these days, but all of those same journeys and stories that occurred for us back then are kind of still happening for the people that are doing it now. So I think that's the best similarity.
That's awesome. And obviously they've changed the rules. Back then you were allowed to bite people's ears off, I think. Is that right? Is that what happened to you?
No. Not in the ring, actually. So that was working as a bouncer.
Wow.
So yeah, famed incident. So in just William Street, just off Chapel Street one night. So just a crazy kind of night that started out being relatively normal, finished really crazy, and I lost my ear, unfortunately. So most of it. But yeah, I'd had some damage on that before. I'd had so yeah, for the guys at home. But so I'd had a lot of cauliflower damage on that side. Being orthodox, you always typically get punched on your left side.
Yeah.
And that was my favorite takedown, was double legging on that side. So when it came time to kind of get seriously damaged by being bitten off and attempted to be reattached, that didn't work very well because of the tissue was basically dead already.
Wow.
So be it.
So it was actually bitten off though.
Correct. Like the entire ear was bitten off. So what is left is sewn back on.
Yep.
And then what's missing was the necrotic tissue that didn't actually survive the operation of reattaching it. So similar to like a frostbite where you might lose fingertips or tips of your nose, etc. For skiers, lose it as sort of necrotic tissue. That's basically what that description is, and that was due to the sort of cauliflower damage or the congealed blood stored in my ear, meaning there was no blood flow and your tissue's effectively dead. It just hasn't fallen off yet. So biting it was kind of an accelerated way to get rid of that.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that, man. I mean, it must be quite an intense feeling, like to have an ear and then not have an ear.
It was weird. It was in the middle of an altercation. There was a lot going on. There was multiple people kind of, in and out of it. So I knew exactly what had happened. I was like, oh, wow. I knew that it was gone, but you can't kind of stop. You can't tap out. You can't kind of call time and get the referee or the doctor to check you. You have to continue. So I remember kind of standing up because the guys ran away at the end, and I was holding a shoe in one hand of one of them. And that I'd managed to souvenir, and people were like, oh my God, are you okay? Because I was covered in blood, my blood, obviously. And I said, yeah, look, I'm fine. But I pointed down to the pavement and my perfect ear, like the perfect thing, was just sitting on the pavement. I said, but that's my ear on the ground. And people started really tripping out.
Oh my God.
So yeah, there was I think there was some shock that came later, but much later. And you sort of just put off processing all of that in order to get through the kind of the altercation and make sure it doesn't turn into something more serious.
Sure, absolutely. Wow. I'm blown
and
away.
That's a lesson for our listeners too, to protect their ears from those cauliflower ears.
Oh yeah. And it's an interesting lesson. So I'll share. There was a lot of reflections and realizations afterwards, and I just had my 6th of 7 fights the week previous. So I was in good shape. I was in really good shape. I was training and sparring a lot. I was really, in terms of kind of being prepared for that kind of event, I couldn't have been better. But I also couldn't have been worse, because I'd spent a lot of time in that kind of false scenario where you're training and kind of fighting, inverted commas, with guys in a ring or in a cage in an artificial environment where there are a lot of rules and a lot of terms of rules of engagement that you accept, and you're looking after your opponent. That's not the case in the street, and it's not the case when you've got some guy iced up and kind of just trying to do as much damage as possible and get away. So there are no rules of engagement. So the lesson for me was I put myself in a bad position. I was too relaxed and too confident, and didn't realize how badly hurt I could get in that scenario. And it never it occurred to me that someone might bite me. It wasn't the first time that had happened, but it was certainly the worst time. And so, but by the time it had happened, it was over. It's too late. It was like, okay, that's gone, and I just have to kind of accept and move on. So that was the lesson, was that all of the kind of MMA fighting in the world isn't always the best preparation for a reality situation, like a true reality situation.
Oh, wow.
Well, I also wanted to ask you about your CrossFit experience. So what got you into that? Tell us a bit about that, because you've been quite heavily involved with CrossFit, yeah?
Yeah, I jumped into CrossFit. I tend to find I'm a little bit of an addictive personality. So I think I got addicted to jiu-jitsu for a while. I got addicted to MMA, definitely. I think I got addicted to CrossFit for a while too. So it came around, I'd kind of heard about it, and it came to me in two different ways. The first one was I got sent an advertisement, and it was a newspaper clipping out of a Perth newspaper, and it was this gym that was saying, are you tough enough to join? And they basically put you through this selection process. It was this CrossFit gym called The Mill. It was run by these two SAS or ex-SAS soldiers. And so I was like, oh, that looks pretty cool. And I just had some knee surgery actually, so I wasn't in good shape. But I decided I'd be interested to have a look. And interestingly, at the same time, I had a training partner of mine, a guy called Lee Berger in WA, who I used to kind of get the better of, who started getting the better of me, and we were equal in size and weight. And he was doing a lot of CrossFit, and I felt like he was beating me on condition and and strength. And I was kind of making all these excuses for him beating me, despite the fact I think he was a purple belt and I was a black belt. And so anyway,
I know all about purple belts beating me.
Oh yeah, purple belts are dangerous. Anton, yeah, they're crazy. Purple belts are crazy. So yeah, I went along to this gym, and it was really tough, super tough. First couple of sessions, I was like, I don't know if I can train that hard, even with the background in MMA and stuff that I'd had. These guys will really put me through my paces, but I kind of liked it. I stuck with it. I really wish I'd gotten into CrossFit before I got into MMA. Like the strength and conditioning element that sort of made I guess for me, really made a difference in terms of my injury resilience. I was much more capable on the mat to get through a training session, to be able to do, if it was an hour and a half on the mat, I'd still be going at the end of the hour and a half, instead of kind of soft pedaling the last 45 minutes and looking for kind of breaks in between rolling with people so I could recover. So I really felt like I accelerated my training by getting a lot more out of it, by being in such better shape as a result of doing CrossFit. And then I kind of got addicted to CrossFit. Ended up going to the CrossFit Games about 3 times, and the regionals about 6 or 7 times, just as a judge, so just as an official. And I basically, the gym that I was associated with went to the regionals in 2011, and I felt like they got some dodgy reffing calls. And having done some reffing in jiu-jitsu and MMA, I was like, oh, I think I could do that. And started judging CrossFit, and really enjoyed it. And this is one of the reasons I do, I guess, MMA, reffing, and officiating as well. It's the best seat in the house. Like if you're interested in looking at sport, or you're a sports fan, then go become a sports official, because watching it on TV is nothing compared to, I get covered in sweat and blood and kind of tears in the MMA sort of cages, and similarly as a CrossFit judge, I get covered in blood, sweat and tears, and sort of running along next to CrossFit guys as well. So that's my motivation. I do it for free, even though there's a small amount of money that goes with it. It's something you do for love, and something you do for the thrill of it. And it's very much for people who are in that sort of space of being a fan.
I totally understand that. One of the things which I wonder is, like, when you're in a moment like that, like you're in a cage and you're reffing to people, and you are a sports fan, and you are a competitor, and you are a BJJ coach, you're all of these things. How do you, I mean, I know that you just have to, but how do you stay present versus taking mental pictures and just enjoying the show? You know what I mean? Like, do you sometimes lose focus? Are you just enjoying the show? You know,
we can never admit to losing
yeah,
focus
we are recording.
as a sports official. It all has to appear perfect, and you're the grey man that kind of doesn't get involved until the last second. So everything always goes perfectly. That never happens. No, great question. From time to time there can be things that are distracting as an official, but no, as an MMA official, that's an engaging sport. Like it's going to have to be a pretty boring round or a pretty boring fight for you to be kind of thinking about what you might be going to have to eat after the show, or kind of worried about your tax return or any of those things. So it is engaging in the same perspective, not the same as being a fighter, but it's up there. You are really kind of drawn into it. You do. I tend to find after a lot of particularly kind of the intense matches, I'll be like,
yeah,
like, okay, like it's over. He won, he lost, or she won, she lost. Cool. Let's move on to the next one. And that's part of the reason they rotate the referees. It's a tough gig to have to referee a whole fight. I've done it, and I much prefer to kind of tag team a referee every fight or so and kind of let them step in, step up. They've got the mild kind of adrenaline rush that goes with that, and you get to sit back and judge, which can be more difficult actually to maintain focus, because again, if there's not much happening in a round, you've got to kind of keep paying attention to who's winning according to the scorecard, according to the rules, and that can be how's the time going, and what's kind of leading up to that person getting a 10-9 or not. That's where I find my concentration is tested. And I suppose at CrossFit and Jiu-Jitsu can be similar. You can have really quiet matches where two people try and stall each other out for 5, 6, 7, 10 minutes, and you're like, please, I can't keep taking points off you. Well, I can, but it'd be nice if someone did something soon.
Yeah. You said that when you started CrossFit, you found it really helpful for your jiu-jitsu, like in terms of your conditioning and your strength and stuff like that. Can you expand a bit on that? Because sometimes I find when I up my strength and conditioning, it really hinders my jiu-jitsu.
Yes.
And it is a bit of a fine line. Do you think it might be also partly because you were already a black belt when you started doing CrossFit, so it wasn't as taxing on you doing jiu-jitsu, or because it really is tricky to not overtrain the strength and conditioning with jiu-jitsu?
I totally did that. I completely overtrained CrossFit. I added CrossFit to the jiu-jitsu that I was doing rather than kind of do less jiu-jitsu and some CrossFit. I just tried to do as much jiu-jitsu as I always did and add CrossFit. That didn't work. So there were definitely some times where I injured myself, where I overtrained, where I caused myself some sort of fatigue issues and mental focus issues and that type of thing, where I had to kind of sit back and go, no, I need to do some of each, not all of each. So yeah, I think in terms of someone kind of intelligently managing that, you might look at doing a few weeks or kind of a block of training, for example, in CrossFit, and then applying that to a goal you might have in jiu-jitsu, whether it's a stripe on your belt or a competition preparation or something like that. So you might do the CrossFit first to kind of prepare you for the training you're going to need to get through for the jiu-jitsu competition or the MMA fight. I think if you're trying to kind of prepare for an MMA fight and you're really regularly like doing 3 or 4 sessions a week of CrossFit, unless you're like 18 or 19, that probably isn't going to work. So, you're going to get injured, you're going to get overtrained, you're going to get mentally fatigued. So yeah, great question. You do need to find a balance there. And yeah, I did the same as you, Kim. I tried to do it all, and yeah, had a few setbacks before I learned how to balance it and learned how to kind of make one complement the other.
Cool.
Do you have a question, Anton? Or I can jump
your
in
name is Gerald Batty. Is that not correct? And you seem to have dropped the Burton. And is it like dads? Did you
couldn't have 2 double-barrel names on the show.
Yeah,
that's it, Harrison Kerr. That's it. You're like, why did he do that?
Yeah, I got called Anton 2 Dads when I was growing up.
Oh, me too, of course.
Correct. Not at the same time.
Yeah.
But, at the same time, just not the same.
Is that how yours came about? It was a combination of surnames?
My mum remarried and I took on my stepfather's name as well.
Cool.
Kind of to show that I was in the deal, I had a choice.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, so
I think that's great.
What about you?
Mine was a little different. Mine was so Burton Batty was the name I was born with. It goes back several generations to 3 sons or 3 brothers who all had Burton as their second name, and then one of them adopted it as a surname and kept it as his surname, and then his sons kept it, and so on and so forth. So I'm gonna say it wasn't really correct. Like in terms of like my family lineage and heritage, it was Burton Batty for a few generations, and then just Batty before that. And I was the same as you. I went through school kind of copying all the jokes, all the kind of, do you remember the old 1980s ad? It was like, and it was for Bert and Patty, like the idea, Dame Joan and Slim all agree. And I'm trying to think, it was for like some kind, it was either a bank or it was one of the maybe big 4 banks or something.
Yeah.
So people used to just start singing that to me.
Bert,
Patty, like the idea. And you'd be like, yeah, no wonder I became a fighter.
So everyone has their reason for getting into martial arts.
That's it. So I was just sick of being teased.
Yeah.
But yeah, look, when it came time to have Jack, I thought long and hard about, am I going to kind of give this poor kid, a double-barreled surname for the rest of his life?
Yeah.
I really tried really hard to think about a cool name that might come up that I could give him that might kind of complement the Burton Batty. There are none. I couldn't, if you can think of one, let me know. But I came up with nothing. So I decided to drop it. So by depoll went to the New South Wales Birth, Deaths and Marriages Registry, changed it. It cost a little bit of money, a few $100, takes a month or 2. So I now have a new birth certificate, a new change of name certificate. So my name now is just Gerald Batty, which is kind of what it always should be. His name is Jack Batty, which is a pretty cool name.
I love it.
And instead of Jack Burton Batty. Now here's the twist. So the twist is you can call your child whatever you want.
Yeah.
It doesn't have, you don't have to get your surname. Like it's kind of like this tradition. There's nothing, as I understand it, there's no legislation or something that says that Anton, if your next child must be kind of John, Harrison, Kurt, that's not, not in legislation. So I was like, oh, really? So I was sort of, as Jack was after he was being born, and we were going through the registry and stuff like that, I was sort of starting to explain, oh, well, I used to have this surname. No, like, yeah, whatever. Not interested, don't care. And so I was like, oh yeah, but this was a big deal. And they're like, no, maybe it was to you, but not to Jack. If you want to call him Jack Batty, that's fine.
We carry all his baggage.
Yeah. So I was like, and so that was a weird kind of experience because I gave up my name. So it was really, I still under pressure. Every now and then I'll get asked to do a video clip or something for work, and I'll introduce myself as Gerald Burton Batty because that's what I've done for 45 years. And it's only been the last couple of years that it's changed. So I kind of feel like I understand how women might feel as they go through marriage and have to give up their surname and have a completely different surname. So I'm like, I've got a kind of a mild taste of that.
Got it.
And it's weird. Like it's for a few years, it's weird.
Amazing.
We are nearly out of time, Gerald, so I don't want this to cut off, but just want to quickly get in to say thank you so much for giving up your time. It's been awesome. As I said, one of the OGs of Australian Jiu-Jitsu. So we'll have this out ASAP.
Thanks, guys.
Everyone, Spotify, iTunes, Facebook. We'll have it out here.
Peace out, everybody. Catch you later.
Thanks, Anton. Really appreciate the invitation.